Very warm welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to our viewers in North America and around the globe. My name's Mike Embley. Our top stories. Moscow expels 60 American diplomats. The UN warns the spy poisoning case is pushing Russia and the West towards a new Cold War. Yulia Skripal, one of the victims of the Salisbury nerve agent attack, is now conscious and talking. Her father, Sergei, remains critically ill. Theresa May promises to make Brexit a success for everyone and insists it will mean more money for schools and hospitals. The battle for blue skies. Beijing cuts pollution by half in the hope of a brighter future.
To say the way my old man's painted.
And a tearful apology from Australia's sacked cricket captain for his role in the ball-tampering scandal. Hello to you. Russia has responded to the expulsion of 60 of its diplomats from the United States by sending home an equal number of American diplomats. It is the latest twist in the international dispute over the poisoning of a former Russian agent and his daughter in the UK. The American ambassador was summoned to the Foreign Ministry to be told the US consulate in St. Petersburg must close. Russia is still denying any involvement in the chemical attack, as Steve Rosenberg reports from Moscow.
The diplomatic pressure has been unprecedented. Russian diplomats expelled, foreign ambassadors recalled after the Salisbury attack. It was never a question of whether Moscow would respond, but when. Tonight, Russia expelled 60 US diplomats for the 60 Russians America had ordered out.
As we speak, the US ambassador is visiting our ministry, where my deputy is informing him of the measures. They include the expulsion of the equivalent number of diplomats.
Russia is also shutting the US consulate in St. Petersburg. Staff there given until Saturday to vacate the building. And there will be other measures too.
As I understand it, Russia plans to take the same unjustified actions against 28 other countries that stood in solidarity with the UK. Russia is further isolating itself following the brazen chemical attack.
An attack that left Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia fighting for their lives. But the BBC understands that Yulia is now conscious and talking. Her father, though, remains critically ill. Earlier, the US ambassador to Moscow told me he was in no doubt who had targeted them.
How certain are you that the Russian state was behind the attack in Salisbury?
There's been enough there to not only convince the United States, but about 25 other countries that have taken similar actions, that there's enough evidence to believe that the Russian state was behind this action in Salisbury.
America has expelled 60 Russian diplomats, part of this coordinated international action. What signal does that send to Moscow, do you think?
You cannot use a military-grade nerve agent on the streets of Salisbury against a British citizen and his daughter without a response. This is an expression of outrage at what happened on the soil of the United Kingdom.
Moscow continues to insist that it's innocent, that it had nothing whatsoever to do with the Salisbury poisoning. Tonight's tit-for-tat was expected, but it comes with a warning that if there are further hostile steps against Moscow, Russia will take more measures against the West. Some in Moscow fear a spiralling diplomatic war with the West could end in military conflict.
This is not the way for solution, it is the way to the hell. If you have not so many diplomats as you have a lack of information, you have a lack of trust, you can react in this or that way, in a wrong way, from the wrong point of view, and this is the way to the hell.
The West sent a strong message here over Salisbury. Moscow has its own message for the West. Don't push Russia. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
As you heard there, doctors are seeing a rapid improvement in the condition of Yulia Skripal, who was poisoned alongside her father. Here's the BBC's Daniel Sanford.
Been a great 24 hours for this police investigation. This afternoon came the frankly amazing news that Yulia Skripal has responded so well to treatment here that she's no longer in a critical condition. Don't forget, it was only a week ago that a judge said that she was unconscious, unable to communicate in any meaningful way, and it was unclear to what extent she would recover any capacity. And I understand that beyond that official NHS update, she is actually both conscious and talking, and will therefore be able to give her account to counter-terrorism detectives of what happened on that Sunday 3.5 weeks ago. Whether she'll be able to explain how it was that she and her father became contaminated is less clear. I understand that she had nerve agent on her left hand, her father had it on his right hand, and that does go along with the current theory that the Novichok nerve agent had been smeared in gel form onto the door handle of the front door of Sergei Skripal's house. But of course what none of this helps anyone to understand is who it was that put the nerve agent there in the first place.
Daniel Stanford for us there. Let's briefly round up some more of the main news for you. The families of 68 people killed in a fire in an overcrowded police station jail in Venezuela are demanding a full explanation. Some relatives accuse police of a massacre in the city of Valencia for an attempted prison break. The state governor has promised those to blame will be held responsible. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been ordered to stand trial on charges of corruption and abuse of power. It's alleged he tried to obtain information from a senior judge in return for the promise of promotion. Last week, Mr. Sarkozy was placed under investigation over claims he took money from Colonel Gaddafi. He denies all the accusations against him. The owners of the app MyFitnessPal say 150 million user accounts have been accessed in a data breach. The American fitness brand Under Armour owns the software. It says usernames, email addresses and passwords may have been stolen, but insists the passwords are protected by strong encryption. An unmanned Chinese space station is about to make an uncontrolled fall to Earth. Experts are not sure exactly when or where Tiangong-1 will come down. They are pretty sure the chances of anyone being hit by wreckage are slim. With exactly a year to go now until the UK is due to leave the European Union and many key questions still unresolved, Britain's Prime Minister has insisted the future is bright. Theresa May visited, very briefly, England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland during the day and told the BBC Brexit would bring great opportunities for the UK as an independent nation.
I understand, because I understand why people voted for leaving the European Union. For a lot of people, immigration, taking back control of our borders was part of it, taking back control of our laws, taking back control of our money. This was all part of why people voted to leave the European Union, and we're going to deliver on that. But we need to make sure that we do it in the way that is best for the United Kingdom, that's best for people's jobs, for people's futures.
So it means people having to be patient?
It means a smooth process. There will be a period of implementation as we put in place the changes necessary for our future relationship, for our future economic partnership particularly. But what is important is that gives certainty to business, it gives certainty to people about what the arrangements are going to be as we move to that brighter future.
Now, Brexit included a big promise on the NHS. You're now making a big promise on the NHS. Some of your colleagues believe the extra cash could come from the so-called Brexit dividend. Do you believe there will be a Brexit dividend, or might there have to be tax rises for the NHS? That's what some people are calling for.
What we're going to do on the NHS is we're going to work with clinicians, with NHS leaders, with others to look at what the plan for the NHS on a longer term should be. We want to provide a multi-year funding settlement, but as we go through that, we'll do that as part of our normal processes. Once again, taking that balanced approach to how we deal with this. Now, you ask about money from the European Union. Of course, when we leave the European Union, we're no longer going to be spending vast sums of money year in and year out, sending that money to the European Union. So there will be money available here in the UK for us to spend on our priorities like the NHS and schools.
So do you believe there will be a Brexit dividend? Would you call it that?
Well, look, there's going to be money that otherwise we would have been sending to the European Union that we're going to be able to spend on the priorities in the UK.
And would you rule out a tax rise for the NHS?
We're going to look at a multi-year funding settlement. We're going to ensure that as we do that, we continue to take a balanced approach to our economy. That's what's enabled us to put money already into the NHS. We're already committed to spending extra sums of money on the NHS.
So I know you're not ruling out a tax rise potentially.
We will, as part of our normal processes, we will look at the funding, but we've got to look at the long-term plan.
Just finally, do you think Brexit will be worth it?
I think there are real opportunities for the United Kingdom. I think there's a bright future out there. And yes, I think Brexit is going to deliver a country. It will be different, but I think there are real opportunities for us as an independent nation for the future.
Prime Minister Theresa May talking to our political editor, Laura Koonsberg. The funeral has been held for another unarmed black man shot dead by police, this time in his grandmother's back garden. Stephen Clark was shot 20 times by officers who said they thought he was carrying a gun. Only a cell phone, a mobile, was found on his body. The civil rights leader, the Reverend Al Sharpton, was among those gathered to remember the 22-year-old, as Lebo Diseko reports.
They came to remember one man.
Stefan Alonzo Charlie Evan Artheo Clark.
But amid the grief, there was anger.
We are proud of them for standing up for justice.
A family, a community, and its leaders demanding answers. These are the moments just before Stefan Clark was shot dead. It was filmed by police who say they were responding to reports of break-ins in the area. Moments later, Mr. Clark was shot dead in his grandmother's backyard. He'd been shot 20 times. Police say they thought he was carrying a gun, but no weapon was found on him, just a cell phone. At a press conference on Monday, his family called it an execution.
Young man who were bombing homes in Austin, Texas. The police followed him for hours. He wasn't shot once, but an unarmed black man holding a cell phone is shot 20 times.
Two officers, one of whom is black, have been put on administrative leave while an investigation is carried out. But the incident has led to days of protests, and once again questions are being asked about how the black community in America is policed. Lebo Diseko, BBC News.
Very good to have you with us on BBC News. Stay with us if you can. Much more to come, including this. 5 years after she was left for dead by the Taliban, Malala makes an emotional return to Pakistan.
The accident that happened here was of the sort that can at worst produce a meltdown. In this case, the precautions worked, but they didn't work quite well enough to prevent some old fears about the safety features of these stations from resurfacing.
The Republic of Ireland has become the first country in the world to ban smoking in the workplace. From today, anyone lighting up in offices, businesses, pubs and restaurants will face a heavy fine.
The president was on his way out of the Washington Hilton Hotel where he had been addressing a trade union conference. The small crowd outside included his assailant.
It has become a symbol of Paris. 100 years ago, many Parisians wished it had never been built. The Eiffel Tower's birthday is being marked by a reenactment of the first ascent by Gustave Eiffel.
Latest headlines for you from BBC News. Moscow says it's expelling 60 American diplomats. The UN warns the spy poisoning case is pushing Russia and the West towards a new Cold War. Prime Minister Theresa May has promised to make Brexit a success for everyone. She says it will mean more money for schools and hospitals. More now on our main story. We can go live to Washington, D.C. and our correspondent, Chris Buckler. Chris, they seem to be reserving the right there to respond further, so there is more potential for this to get more serious, possibly more dangerous.
Yeah, the State Department making very clear today that they are reviewing exactly what Russia has done. And if you take a look at it, it is very much a mirror of the action that America took. 60 officials for 60 officials. An embassy closing for an embassy closing. This is Russia making very clear that this is very simple retaliation for what America did. But the State Department is now considering retaliation itself. And that means that they are thinking of further diplomatic action. But they are taking a moment to pause and to think here, because everybody accepts that there is a real danger of things escalating here and continuing to escalate. Perhaps the stronger words have come from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres when he said that there is the potential for this to deteriorate into another Cold War. Now, frankly, nobody wants that. And there is a real sense that everybody is going to try and take some stock here. At the same time, the US is trying to show that it doesn't accept Russia's suggestion that it is some kind of victim in this. In fact, there were strong words in which they said people should remember that the real victims here are Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia, who were, of course, poisoned using that nerve agent in Salisbury. That is something that the Russians deny. But they also recognise that they have to try and keep open some kind of communication with Russia, that it's in both countries' interests. And reporters were asking at that State Department briefing specifically about Donald Trump, who has remained relatively silent. There have been statements from the White House, but for example on Twitter, where very often we see his real thoughts, he hasn't said that much. Now, there was an acceptance from the State Department that they do need to have a relationship. Vladimir Putin and he have had conversations in which it is alleged that he did not bring up this case of this poisoning, but they say that is about the fact that Russia and America need to keep up some kind of communications. Although, you've got to say, if this isn't the return of the Cold War, certainly from the language, relationships are becoming much, much frostier.
Chris, thank you very much for that. Take it to California, where a judge has ruled that Starbucks and other coffee companies will have to put a cancer warning label on coffee products sold in the state. The ruling says there's been a failure to show that the threat from a chemical compound produced when roasting coffee is insignificant. The companies are expected to appeal. The Nobel Peace Prize winner Malala Yousafzai has made a very emotional return to Pakistan 5 years after she was shot in the head and left for dead by Taliban gunmen. She moved to the UK after the attack. She now campaigns for women's education and for human rights. Alison Freeman reports.
Under the cover of darkness and amid tight security, Malala Yousafzai returned home to Pakistan. It was the first visit by the human rights activist since she was shot by the Taliban in 2012. Malala met the Prime Minister and went on to take the stage at his office to give an emotional speech, often wiping away tears. It was broadcast on state TV.
I still can't believe that this is actually happening.
Malala was shot in the head by a gunman 5.5 years ago. She'd been campaigning for girls' education in the Swat Valley, which at the time was a militant stronghold. Now an Oxford University student, having lived in the UK ever since, in 2014 she became the youngest person to win the Nobel Peace Prize. But today she recognised the changes in her home country.
From growing up in Swat Valley, इतना खूबसूरत इलाका था, to then seeing extremism and terrorism in 2007 till 2009, and then seeing how many difficulties women and girls face in our society and how we can fight against those challenges. I can move on the streets, I can meet people, I can talk to people, and there is my old home again. जैसे पहले था वैसा ही हो.
Her trip is expected to last 4 days, but it's not clear if she'll visit her hometown of Swat. Alison Freeman, BBC News.
The Fox News presenter Laura Ingraham has apologised for taunting a survivor of the school shooting in Parkland, Florida. In response, David Hogg has called on Ingram's advertisers to boycott her show. Several of them, about 6 so far, including TripAdvisor and Nestle and Johnson & Johnson, have confirmed on Thursday they will pull advertising from her show. China's rapid industrialization and economic growth have produced record levels of pollution. It's reckoned toxic smog is responsible for at least 1 million premature deaths a year. But in Beijing, pollution levels fell this winter by more than 50%. The government is claiming success for a crackdown on factories using coal. As our China correspondent John Sudworth reports, it's not just the government trying to make a difference.
Beijing's skies are a strange colour of late. Blue. In place of the usual toxic grey, this winter has brought prolonged bouts of days like these. And here, in part at least, is why. This factory is one of thousands that have been forced to close. They used to make ceramic tiles here. Now the kilns that once belched acrid smoke stand idle.
It was all very sudden. There were no meetings or warnings. The inspection team just turned up and shut us down.
Beijing still sees plenty of days like this, but the city's average level of PM 2.5s, the tiny particles that make up these P-super smogs, fell by 20% last year. And here's further evidence of the huge political will involved: new gas pipes. Hundreds of villagers surrounding Beijing have been ordered to stop burning coal on such a scale that the price of gas on the international market doubled. Whether we want to switch to gas or not, we have no choice, he says. Local people complain about the costly changes forced on them to clean the air of the wealthy middle classes in the city. Beijing's ability to launch its battle for blue skies is, it could be argued, down to its authoritarian advantage, forcing many thousands to switch energy supplies overnight and closing factories at the stroke of a pen. But it's also had something else on its side, a little bit of luck. Here's a typical day last winter. That's Beijing, buried beneath a blanket of smog, the reds and purples on the map. This winter, though, the city has been blessed with unusually strong northerly winds, bringing with them cleaner air, the blues, greens and yellows. In the bigger picture, though, China's wider, continental-sized pollution problem has not gone away. But even if the progress is limited, it's significant. China has begun to show that it can trade economic growth for the environment. John Sudworth, BBC News, Beijing.
Australia's former cricket captain Steve Smith has broken down in tears as he made a public apology for his role in the ball-tampering scandal. His news conference in Sydney was quickly followed by the Australia coach Darren Lehmann announcing his own resignation once the current tour in South Africa is over. This from our sports editor, Dan Rowan.
From Australian cricket's leader to its loneliest figure, Steve Smith back in Sydney and facing the cameras today, having been sent home in disgrace for his team's cheating scandal.
To all of my teammates, to fans of cricket all over the world, and to all Australians who are disappointed and angry, I'm sorry.
Supported by his father, the former captain's anguish obvious.
Anytime you think about making a questionable decision, think about who you're affecting your parents, and to see the way my old man's been and
thanks everybody.
And my mum, it hurts.
Smith was banned for a year for covering up a teammate's use of sandpaper to tamper with the ball during the Cape Town Test match last weekend. Cameron Bancroft admitting today he also misled match officials when he was caught.
I lied about the sandpaper and I panicked. I panicked in that situation, and I'm very sorry.
Back in Johannesburg came yet another casualty of the crisis. 48 hours after being backed by his bosses to continue, coach Darren Lehmann quitting.
I just want to let you know that this will be my last test as head coach of the Australian cricket team as I'm stepping down.
After seeing events in the media today with Steve Smith and Cameron Bancroft, the feeling is that Australian cricket needs to move forward, and this is the right thing to do.
Meanwhile, the instigator of the cheating, Vice-Captain David Warner, had little to say.
Can talk to you in a couple of days. Yeah, plans to deal with this. Thank you, guys.
As he arrived back on Australian soil with his family. When fans gather here at the Wanderers tomorrow for the first day's action in the fourth and final Test match, all the talk will be about one of the most remarkable weeks in cricket history. The sandpaper plot has now cost Australia its captain, vice-captain and the head coach after Darren Lehmann's dramatic resignation here just a few hours ago. Rarely has a cricket tour been laid quite so low. Once sidelised,
that's the shot!
Then vilified, Smith's road to redemption began today. But this fall from grace has been particularly painful. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Johannesburg.
Just finally, this footage is a bit of a joy, though it could have ended very differently. If you're going on safari to see wildlife and experience the wonders of nature, here is a cautionary tale. One group got uncomfortably close to nature when a cheetah jumped onto the SUV. While everyone focused on that cheetah, another one decided to jump inside. This was in the Serengeti National Park in Tanzania. We're told while all this was going on, the tour guide was warning everyone on board very quietly, presumably, to avoid making eye contact with the cats, which they would take as a challenge, it seems. It seems people did manage to keep shooting video. The cats, of course, are known for their speed. It's safe to say that these cheetahs took their time. They were there for about 10 minutes. Luckily for the occupants of the vehicle, one of the cheetahs sees a gazelle, which is its more natural food. Maybe it decides it's more interesting than the vehicle or its passengers. That's it for now. Much more anytime on the BBC website. Thank you for watching.